Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dimensional Fork in the Road Summit, where we are gathering with an amazing group of spiritual teachers, light workers, and wisdom keepers to explore the fifth dimension and the road ahead of us. This event is designed to open space for us to engage with our evolutionary choices and to offer a tangible vision as well as practical tools to forge a high-frequency pathway for humanity. So step into this sacred space with us and immerse yourself in the consciousness of the fifth dimension. Here you will receive inspiration and guidance to move through these transitional times and anchor a fifth dimensional reality for yourself and for the planet. My name is Linn. I'm your host and the creator of this event. And I'm delighted to be here today with CAVALHER. Welcome, CAVALHER, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, for having invited me.
It's a great pleasure. Let me introduce you to our audience. So CAVALHER is a consciousness designer, a mind hacker, a visionary author, an illusions destroyer, and is passionate about transcending limits. His vision is to help people live a life that makes sense, realizing what is consciously envisioned for life, career, and business. For the past 20 years, CAVALHER has been guiding individuals and businesses to map and rewrite their psychological algorithms present in the unconscious mind, which is 4D, and the pneumatic mind, 5D. He is the visionary author of the book Paradigm of Sense, a guide to the consciousness of the fifth dimension, published in 2018. In this post-Jungian exploration of the fifth dimensional landscape, the paradigm of sense leads to superior consciousness and produces the power to create the life of your dreams, to create top performance for professionals and higher results for business. Above all, it changes the behavior of life towards you. Born and raised in Brazil, CAVALHER currently lives in Portugal. CAVALHER's topic is the unthinkable, a fifth dimensional view on the nature of the higher self. A provocative topic indeed. I feel that my own paradigm is about to be challenged. So, CAVALHER, can you start by explaining your concept of a dimension and perhaps what you understand by 3D, 4D, 5D?
Okay, so there are two approaches to the idea of dimensions. One of them is that they are a place, and this has some validity, but the way I perceive it is in another perspective. That is, the dimensions are stages of consciousness development, and I would say natural stages. What I mean by natural is that whoever wants to work, to do the work, and I mean psychological work and spiritual work, or the word that I prefer, pneumatic work, is going to be able to achieve these stages of consciousness development.
Right.
So it is not something that is reserved for special people with special gifts or ascended masters, but something that is designed to be stages of consciousness development or evolution, if you prefer this word, for every human being. And I think that this is important because we are here in an event that is promoting the idea that we can have a higher frequency for all of humanity. And I think that one key idea of this higher frequency is that it is available to all instead of reserved for some special people.
Yes.
So I think that needs to be stressed.
Yes.
And so up to now, I usually speak about 3 dimensions in particular, although we could start by the first dimension, like 1D, a 1D consciousness, which could be summarized as a instinctual consciousness without the ability to abstraction. Then we would go, and I would say an animal-like consciousness, without the ability of subjectivity or putting things into perspective. So it would be a 100% embodied type of consciousness. But when you move into 2D, you start to create a whole society. So the idea of a tribe, the idea of a society emerged before the idea of an individual. And this idea of a group that exists as a whole, as a group, is second dimensional. Then you go to the current level of consciousness development of most of mankind, the majority of mankind, that is 3D. And this dimension is based on the concept of being a separate individual with a separate consciousness and a defined identity or personality. And the idea of separation is very strong. The idea of formation of an ego is very strong. And that's why we perceive our world as a 3D world with the classical 3D, 3 dimensions. When you move into the 4th dimension, which is being experienced by a part of mankind already, that's when the unconscious mind comes into the scene. So the 4th dimension is the unconscious mind. It is kind of a backstage of reality, where things are coming from. So a good metaphor to understand that would be the stage of a theater. So what we see on stage before our eyes is our 3D world. So where things are happening. But there is a backstage where the actors and actresses are coming from, and not only the backstage, but their whole lives, their homes, their families, everything that is around them, and then their reality before they get on stage. So this backstage of reality is the unconscious mind. It is the 4th dimension. And the basic way that people experience this dimension is by seeing things in their dreams and patterns in their lives, in their own behaviors, their relationships, and the situation that they experience that that show what is going on in the backstage. But the cause of reality is not in our world. Our world is the consequence of the backstage. The cause of our reality is in the backstage, in the unconscious mind. This is a 4th dimensional perspective. And when you follow these images and understand these patterns, there comes a time when you have made a tour, let's say like that, in the whole of your unconscious mind. It doesn't mean you are omniscient, because we'll never be, but it means that you have experienced at least a bit of each one of these sites in this tour that we see in our unconscious mind. For those who are Jungians, these are the archetypes. And after you have experienced at least a bit of this whole, and you have understood the concept of wholeness, then you reach a next dimension, that is the 5th dimension. And at this stage, instead of being guided, instead of participating in a guided tour by the higher self, or conducted by the higher self, you get access to the full spectrum of possibilities that many images present in this pneumatic mind, one level deeper than the unconscious mind. And then you can make choices among these images you see in this pneumatic mind. And after you have chosen which image you want to work with, you can create full-grown realities out of this image. So it's a more, let's say, adult landscape of your inner world, because instead of being guided by some transcendental force, the transcendental force still exists, but it gives you choices, and you are going to be responsible for those choices.
Right, thank you. That's a really interesting way of looking at the dimensional levels, if you like, and yeah, more from a psychological perspective. So from this perspective, Cavalier, can you elaborate more about your understanding of the fifth dimension when we are operating at that level of consciousness?
Yes. Well, again, the fifth dimension is a natural stage of development, of consciousness development. So this is important. And it is reached when you have already integrated your higher self in 4 dimensions. So this is let's say, the starting point of the fifth dimension. And on a practical level, that means that you have experienced the basic blocks of the human psyche, or in Jungian terms, the archetypes, or for example, the great mother, the great father, the hero, the divine child, the shadow, the wise man or wise woman, the animus or anima, and the persona, and the self itself. So you have experienced all those patterns of the human psyche, or if you prefer mythology, you could express that you have gotten in touch with each one of the Olympian gods, or if you prefer astrology, you have experienced at least a bit of each one of the 12 signs. So you can choose your symbolic system, but the idea is that you have experienced all of them, at least to a point, because each one of them is infinite, so it's never going to be 100% complete. It's a paradox. You have been there, but they are infinite. So coming from this landscape, from this level of consciousness, what happens in the fifth dimension is that instead of the higher self trying to guide you through images like it does in 4D, sending you dreams that say things like this: now you need to work your feminine side, and you need to do the tasks A, B, and C in order to develop your feminine side. Or you need to work your creativity. You need to do E, D, and F in order to develop your creativity. So instead of doing this, what a 5D higher self does is that it shows you many possibilities of world lines for you. What I mean by world line is a fully grown reality. So it shows you images in your dreams or even in your day-by-day life that you can use as raw material to create new realities. So let's work with examples.
Okay.
Yeah, please. Is that a good idea?
Yes, please. Yeah, I think examples are great because it really grounds the idea in something tangible.
Yes. So one interesting dream I had, I had a client who had this dream. This client is a very clever woman. She has developed some very interesting techniques that are rooted in Jungian psychology, but work mainly with meaning. And she has had a dream. She grew without her father. She was raised by her mother alone. And our work together in her consciousness development also included the development of an inner father figure for her. Because the human psyche needs every possible archetype to be fully operational in order for that psyche to become whole and be able to function in a healthy way. So because she did not have a father in her childhood, this part of her psyche was not developed. So we did that. We create, through her dreams and conversations, we created for her the structure of a father figure inside of her. And this made her a better professional with a better performance. But then when she started to work the same idea in 5D, she had this dream. And in this dream, her father was in front of her, and then the voice of the dream, possibly people who are watching this have had dreams with a voice telling things inside the dream. So she had one of these dreams, and the voice told her, now you must choose the star sign of your father. She was an astrologist, so she knew the 12 star signs. And the dream said, choose. And then because she wanted so deeply to be a good professional, she chose the star sign Virgo for her father, because this is a very effective sign with a high performance energy. So she decided that. And after that, she had a series of dreams with a very professional father. Okay. So this is the kind of landscape that you see in 5D and you don't see in 4D, because in 4D, things are brought to you the way the higher self sees fit, and you have to accept it. The higher self is even able to enforce its view on your consciousness. But in 5D, the higher self expects you to make choices and create realities. So by choosing the star sign Virgo, she chose to create a reality that was intensely oriented towards professionalism, effectiveness, and productivity.
Right. So what you're saying, Cavalier, is that in 5D, we get to much more actively and consciously create versions of reality.
Yes, yes.
That might serve us.
Yes, yes. Up to 5D, the concept of reality is something like this. Reality exists by itself. Let's work with a 3D concept of reality, a 4D one, and the 5D one. Mm-hmm. So in 3D, the concept of reality is, the reality is completely separated from your mind, your consciousness. It exists independently of you. You are put inside this reality. It's a given fact. And what you can do is choose what you can do inside the reality that has been given to you. Okay. So for example, now I am a man. I was born in Brazil in 1980. So that was my reality. I could not choose to be born an Indian woman in 1990. So I had to start at that point. So you were given a reality and you must accept it, and you need to choose what to do inside this reality. When you move to 4D, you understand that reality is psychological. It is not a material thing that is separated from you. It reflects what is in your mind, both consciously and mainly unconsciously. So I would like take numbers out of my head here and say that using the iceberg metaphor, I could say that 10% of our reality reflects consciousness, and the other 90% reflect the unconsciousness. And that is a very practical thing. I don't want people to think that this is like some mysterious thing people cannot apprehend. On the contrary, it's a very practical thing. So when you're doing consciousness development, you can see clearly that the images in your dreams are being reflected by reality. So they are, your behaviors reflect these images in your dreams. The relationships you have reflect these images in your dreams. The life situations you experience reflect these images in your dreams. And when you work with these images and change these images using some methodology, then the reality changes to accommodate these new images present in your dreams. So if reality is responding to the images present in your dreams, reality does not exist as a separate entity that has nothing to do with your mind. It is a reflection of your mind. So reality is not material, it is psychological. Okay. But when you move to a 5D landscape, a pneumatic landscape, then things are differently because work differently, because instead of reflecting the only reality that exists in your psyche, both consciousness and the unconscious mind, the 5D higher self starts to present you a series of images at the same time. So it could show you the image of the Fifth Avenue in New York, then rice plantations in Vietnam, or the ancient Roman Empire, or the economy of China, or a garden with a family. So things that are unrelated. And it shows all these images at the same time. And instead of you having only one image reflecting itself onto the reality, you have many images that could reflect themselves onto the reality. And you need to choose, as my client chose the star sign of her psychological father. And after you choose which reality you want to create, there is a series of actions you can take and methodologies you can use in order to manifest that image in your reality. So from a 5D perspective, instead of having only one reality, you have many realities among which you need to choose according to what makes sense to you and those around you.
Right, okay. So it's this concept of multiple versions of reality, multiple possibilities, and creating in accordance with a multidimensional awareness, if you like.
Yes.
I guess it's
yes.
another way of saying it.
Go on.
What I want to ask here is, because you've mentioned the higher self a few times, why is the nature of the higher self unthinkable?
Well, this is a very interesting idea, because you see, you can separate the human psyche or pneumatic mind, which is one level deeper or higher, depending on which system you want to focus on. In major sections. The first section is consciousness. The other section is the unconscious mind. The other section is the pneumatic mind. And the other section is the whole. The higher self is the whole of the thing. So this whole separates itself in a consciousness and unconscious mind. Let's keep it simple up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
So the basic definition of consciousness is the group of things or the set of things that you know. That's what being conscious means. So you know A, B, and C. And the basic definition of the unconscious mind is the set of things that you don't know. And this is the first thing to emphasize, because not knowing means not knowing. And I emphasize this because I see sometimes professionals or spiritualists talking about the unconscious mind as if it were something that they know. They say things like, in my unconscious mind, there is this, or there is that, or it does this, it does that, and I know this, I know that. So if you know, it's not the unconscious. If you know, it's consciousness.
Right, yeah.
So this is the first correction we need to make in order to understand this. So in order to understand what the unthinkable is, first you need to understand what the thinkable is. So the thinkable is the set of things that you can think of, which is consciousness. So this is what you already know. And the higher self does not need to bring you what you already know. It is always going to bring you what you do not yet know.
Okay.
And if you do not yet know, it needs to be unthinkable.
Okay.
And it is a series of unthinkable things. Because suppose you are here, today is September 22nd. So everything that has happened to you up to this date is thinkable. You can understand it to a deeper level or to a superficial level, but it is thinkable. But you have this huge road ahead of you, a space-time road, a path that extends itself in space and time. And you have not yet walked this path. So from September 23rd onwards is unthinkable to you. But tomorrow, September 3rd, will be thinkable. And after the day after tomorrow, the September 24th, will be thinkable. But September 25th will still be unthinkable.
Mhm.
So, and the infinite series of days or whatever unit of time that we are going to experience in the next worlds, they are an infinite series of unthinkable experiences. This has huge implications in spirituality. It seems a simple idea, but it has huge implications. And two of them that are important. The first one is that it's very easy to find consciousness, psychological or spiritual systems that standardize their dogmas, their views on reality. Maybe the most emblematic example and even a caricature of spirituality is the current strong belief in gratitude. So gratitude is a beautiful thing. I'm not criticizing the idea. I am very grateful for my life that has been amazing up to now, and I believe it still will be from now on. So I'm very grateful. I go to bed every night and thinking and feeling, wow, this was awesome. So it's not a criticism against the idea, but against the standardization of spirituality. So it is presented to you as something that you must have, you must think, you must feel, and above all, everybody must experience this. So when it becomes a standardization of spirituality, an enforced dogma that is preached, then it is against the unthinkable nature of the higher self. Because if you can formulate spirituality as a fixed idea that you already know, you are no longer in touch with the unthinkable nature of the higher self. So from my perspective, if you are going to align yourself with the higher self, you need to be always ready to let go what you already know, what you are already sure of, your certainties, in favor of what you do not know. My career has been a 23 years commitment to not knowing what is going to happen with me or my clients, should them be people or businesses. This is even difficult to market because you are going to sell the undetermined outcome. But it is necessary that it is like that. And the second outcome that is striking is that we talk about wholeness all the time in spirituality and in consciousness development systems. We even use the yin-yang symbol, that black and white circle, all the time. It is possibly one of the most famous spiritual symbols of all times. It is even an emoji in our phones. But despite that, spiritualists continue to try to eliminate the black side of the circle. Or in other words, they continue to try to eliminate darkness or the bad and dark side of reality. By doing that, they're limiting wholeness. They're separating wholeness and creating duality. So wholeness and the unthinkable nature of the higher self is a very harsh understanding of reality, because it forces us to accept that the higher self can bring anything to us, anything. It is not going to abide by our view of the reality. It is not us who are unlimitedly powerful to enforce our view over the higher self, forcing the higher self to behave in ways we think proper. It's the other way around. The higher self has all the power to show us the reality it wants to show us. And that is unthinkable, both in the sense that it is going to be necessarily surprising, and also it can and will include dark sides of reality that we don't like, that we classify as bad, but they are part of wholeness and forever will be.
Well, that leads to a very interesting question. If that's the case, is the fifth dimension necessarily a high frequency pathway for humanity?
Yes, it is. And but in a different way that people would possibly expect. Because if you were going to create a higher frequency, if you're going to become more elevated and closer to wholeness, this needs to be a practical thing, meaning despite techniques, spiritual techniques are very important. For example, meditation or training in this or that technique. I love some techniques. For example, Hofi is something that I am passionate about. Or meditation is something that I practice for over 20 years already. As a matter of fact, I practice 10 types of meditation concurrently for 20 years already. So there is there are lots of techniques that I appreciate very much, but they need to become a part of your day-by-day life. They need to become behavior. They cannot be something that you experience 1 hour every day and then you forget about it and continue to be the person you have always been. So a few things that really need to change in order for us to create a real paradigm shift is that some things that are part of what I call the old spirituality, the old eon spirituality, they need to be left behind and replaced by things that are more compatible with the energies that are now expressing themselves. And you, as you introduced me to this beautiful audience, I am also an illusions destroyer, and that means that I sometimes speak things that are that are controversial and difficult to deal with. And one of these things is that Christianity has brought us a heritage of spiritual concepts that sometimes are very limiting. And these ideas will have to be left behind. They have served a purpose. They have helped us to be fourth dimensional. For example, Carl Jung uses the Christian dogma and mainly the figure of Christ to depict and create the landscape of the unconscious mind and the 4D higher self and his whole analytical psychology, who is a masterpiece in my opinion. And I am an admirer and even a student of Christ. So I admire very much these geniuses, these spiritual masters, but certain limiting ideas need to be left behind. So one of them is the imposed dogma that comes from Christianity or any other religion or any other spiritual system, including current spiritual systems. So we see like holistic worldviews and esoteric worldviews that also impose dogma, also impose worldview. So it's not something particular of this or that religion, but the action of imposing dogma. And in 5D, this is impossible. In 5D, you cannot have, as we were discussing before, you cannot have one single version of reality. So if you're not going to have, for example, let's be radical here. My view on 5D is not the only possible view on 5D. And this is a very practical thing for me because I have other people with superior consciousness and very strong power that are my friends who have alternative views to 5D, alternative views that are useful to me. Sometimes I go to their views and borrow them techniques into my world. They have saved me sometimes from situations that my own view could not deal with. So I am very aware that different perspectives are a mandatory thing in 5D. Freedom is mandatory in 5D.
Yes.
So one thing that is important is that you have your own direct, conscious, and continuous contact with your higher self in order for you to have your own view on spirituality. Interestingly enough, this is an idea that comes also from Christianity, because the teaching of the Holy Ghost, the third person of the Holy Trinity, is exactly this: the direct manifestation of the transcendental source of the universe directly to your consciousness. And again, I emphasize that this is not theoretical. There are methodologies you can follow and use in order to establish this direct, conscious, and continuous contact with your higher self. So this is one thing. The second thing is that we inherited the shame of our own nature from old spirituality. So most of spiritual systems are based on some kind of morality. And what I mean by morality is the separation of reality into two groups: the good and the loud set of things, and the bad and prohibited set of things. Of course, this is going to create duality. And of course, this is, we have this impression that good things have always been good and will always be good, and bad things have always been bad and will always be bad. But this is a great illusion. As Friedrich Nietzsche showed in his genealogy of morality, these values change depending on the society and on the time. Even currently, each country has its own set of good values and bad values. So this is a very relative thing to experience. So, but what it creates is shame of our own nature. Because when you have a part of yourself that goes against what is defined as good and allowed, you have to repress that part of your nature. And you do that. And in order to do that, you're going to use shame and guilt. And then you become separated, you become divided inside yourself. This is also impossible in 5D, because in 5D, you live in unity, so everything is allowed. This is a very radical concept. We can elaborate in another conversation, but the reality is that everything is allowed. Every part of your being has its place, needs to have room to manifest in a human way, in a conscious way. So you need to be able to accept who you really are, and that includes your dark sides.
Okay, so there's that concept of wholeness again, and the lack of duality, just bringing it all in.
Yes.
We need to start wrapping up soon, but I want to ask you one last thing, Cavalier, because you work with businesses as well. How can the fifth dimension or fifth dimensional consciousness benefit business?
Well, the problems that business experience are not technical problems. For example, let's consider a hospital. A hospital hires a doctor, and then it starts to experience problems with this doctor. The problems are very unlikely going to be that the doctor doesn't know medicine. He can know medicine in a better way or in a worse way, but usually the problems are not going to be what he learned in college. The problems are going to be power disputes, treason, insecurity, lack of self-esteem, inability to relate to your peers. So the problems that businesses experience are much more psychological than technical. So a quick example is power disputes, power struggles inside companies. Many times I have experienced talking to CEOs or some C-level guy, and I would see people offering solutions to the businesses that they were part of. And these solutions were clearly solutions that would enhance the performance of professionals and the results of the companies. And then the C-level or the CEO would deny the professional to implement that solution. And the reason was that that solution, despite its higher results, would limit the power of the CEO or the C-level. So the directors of the company or the president of the company preferred to have lower results and lower financial results because he wanted to have power over other people. This is a very irrational decision. Yeah. So when you use a fifth dimensional perspective to assess a business and to propose solutions to a professional or a business, it doesn't need to be a business, it can be a professional or even a person creating his or her own life. What you do is you map what is going on in your unconscious mind and pneumatic mind, 5D, one level deeper, and you can now create the exact drawing of psychological algorithms. So what are psychological algorithms? They are psychological laws that you obey without being aware of these laws. For example, practical examples. In the example I just mentioned, the CEO, this is a very common psychological algorithm. The psychological algorithm says, every time a proposition is made that limits your power, say no, regardless of the quality of the proposition. So this president will always say no, regardless of the outcomes. Or be nervous every time you are going to make a public presentation. Or never stand out for your own opinion during a meeting. So whatever law that you have in your unconscious mind that determines behaviors that are going to bring negative consequences over your professional performance or your company results. You map those things and then you start to use techniques and methodologies to destroy these psychological algorithms. And then two things happen. One thing is that these algorithms are generally what we use, they're generally a misuse of some kind of intelligence or ability that you naturally have. Mm-hmm. So what you see as a problem is in fact the unconsciousness of how to use a certain type of intelligence or ability that you have. A problem is a denied intelligence. A problem is a denied ability. So when you fix the algorithm, not only you stop to have a problem, but you also start to have a new intelligence or a new ability. Right. A potential becomes developed. Right. And the second thing, and last thing, is that, at least to this basic level of understanding, is that if you remove repetition, if you remove the repetition caused by these psychological algorithms that tell you to always do things in such and such way, if you remove repetition, what happens is that naturally the unconscious mind starts to create things. So when you are in tune with what the unconscious mind and above all the 5D pneumatic mind is doing, because there you have many realities at the same time for you to choose, creativity is not a rare thing to reach for, or innovation is not a rare thing that you need to seek for. It is the rule. It is what the unconscious mind is doing every day. So you could possibly be aware of how much companies strive for creativity and innovation, because that can make you a lot of money these days. And when you are aware of the mechanisms of the unconscious mind and the pneumatic mind above all, creativity and innovation are not rare. They are the common rule. They are the day-by-day dynamics of your psyche.
Right. Thank you. Wow, there's so much potential in working in this way. It sounds fascinating. Unfortunately, we do have to wrap up now. And Cavalier, I'd like to ask you, I know you have a really special free gift for our audience. Would you like to just explain what that is? The details will be on the Summit website, but just describe it for us.
I don't think I understood your question. Sorry.
Okay, so your free gift for our audience, I'm going to just describe it.
Okay.
Tell
Okay.
people what it is. So you are offering an exclusive webinar on a 5D theme. There's going to be a
Yes.
Q&A session included, and this is going to be available for our viewers. They just need to scroll down below this video and they'll see the link for the free gift, and you can claim it in that way. So all that remains is to say thank you, Cavalier, for your time. It's been really fascinating speaking with you.
Thank you very much for having me. Your questions were very enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to our audience for joining the summit. I'm sending light and love to everybody.
Thank you very much for everybody. Thank you.